Let's bring in retired General Philip Breedlove, a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander himself, a distinguished chair, by the way, at the Middle East Institute. So, General, it's my understanding that the reason for the tanks is the expectation that the next 6 months is essentially going to be a modernized version of World War I. A lot of trenches. The Russians have been digging trenches, and that's the need for this. What is that? Explain the importance of why the Ukrainians wanted all these tanks.
Well, first of all, Chuck, thanks for having me. It's more than the tanks. Remember that before the tanks, we have sent Bradleys. And what we're putting together is an armored team that can survive on the battlefield. And one of the words that land force commanders like to say is changing the shape and nature of the battlefield. Like you said, the trench warfare that's going on there now is very static. And this armored element opens up the shape and the availability of the battlefield. Remember that Russia sent an awful lot of tanks into northern Ukraine, and a bunch of them got killed, and they didn't change the shape of the battlefield because they weren't employed well. Tankers will tell you you don't take a tank without dismounted infantry to protect it. And the Bradleys supply mobile infantry so that we can put a powerful armored team on the battlefield that can reshape that linear battlefield via maneuver. Look,
everything gets war gamed. What do you expect the Russians, how they try to counter this?
Well, I don't expect them to really try to counter it. What we've not seen from the Russians is very innovative battlefield tactics. And you've seen a great shuffle among the leadership of the Russian forces because they're not succeeding. They're falling back into their old Grozny type of warfare, ground and pound with the artillery and then throw infantry at the problem. And so I don't really expect that they'll make a lot of changes, and they are suffering manpower problems, as you know.
The one wild card out here is in the air, and I throw that out there because right now the Ukrainian air defenses are working. But if there's one place where the Russians have an advantage, it would be in the air. And how would you expect the Russians to try to attempt to? I mean, you heard Courtney say, if they need to sort of create the illusion of momentum, they might try in the air. What does that look like? And would you be recommending the United States send F-16s in that case?
So let me just jump a little bit in front of your question because I heard you ask Courtney that.
Yeah.
And you get straight to F-16s. I think a more immediate impact on the battlefield and a capability that the Ukrainians are ready right now to accept is the ATACMS, the increased capability for the MLRS artillery system, getting that much longer, precise strike to be able to take the fight deeper to the Russians into Crimea and into their supply lines as they're approaching. If you want to have immediate battlefield impact, it's not the F-16. That's the airplane I float. I love it. It's a great idea. It's something we need to do over time. But if we want to impact the spring offensive, it's the ATACMS that will impact the spring offensive. And that's the first thing I would be pushing for Ukraine.
All right, speaking of time, this coalition in NATO is hanging together, but we see there's moments where you're like, uh-oh, could it crack, right? What do you think the clock is here for Ukraine? What would you be telling the Ukrainian leadership? Look, you got another 6 months, you got another 9 months, and you need to get to this negotiating table. What would you be saying? Is that the window?
Well, no, I wouldn't use those numbers. First, we have to recognize that this is what Mr. Putin is all about. His army is failing in the field in the larger sense. His war of words and his war of fear and his war of deterring NATO from taking actions that it could and possibly should, that war is making great purchase. And Mr. Putin is trying to sell the idea that this is going to be a long war and it's going to grind on and on. And what he's trying to do is drive those wedges in the alliance. Rather than starting to put timelines on it from our side, what we need to do is continue to show the resolve that shows that we are going to be there. And so Mr. Putin's war of words is less effective at trying to drive wedges into the alliance.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind he never thought NATO would not just be hanging together for a year, but a year later, the Germans would be sending tanks. I mean,
and he never thought that Ukraine would take it to him on the battlefield like they are now either.
No, that's for sure. General Breedlove, always good to get your perspective on this program. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.